Without a doubt, the Emergencies Act ruling has taken over the internet as Canadians voice concerns with the Liberal government. While most of the Prime Minister's cabinet have been quick to say they were justified in their decision to use it, one Liberal MP is suggesting it could be time for a leadership review. We're looking at what happens next as the Liberals are set to appeal the federal judge's decision that found the Emergencies Act was unconstitutional. He's been quick to post on X today, from mental health support to his partnership with Slovakia, but Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has yet to make a public statement on the shocking ruling yesterday afternoon.
Canada is the best country in the world, and it's up to us to work hard to make it even better.
This video, filmed in the hours before Justice Mosley's decision, was posted last night, but still no mention of the ruling.
We are aware of the court decision. We have discussed it with the Prime Minister.
The federal court found the Liberal government's invocation of the Emergencies Act in response to the Ottawa convoy protests was unreasonable and led to the infringement of constitutional rights. The protests 2 years ago gridlocked the nation's capital and blockaded key border points. The judge's decision has prompted at least one Liberal MP to question the leadership of his party. Newfoundland MP Ken MacDonald raised his concerns in an interview with CBC Radio Canada.
There's almost a hatred out there right now for Prime Minister Trudeau. As a party, let's clear the air, and if people are still intent on having the leader we have now, fine. But at least give people the opportunity to have their say of what they think.
But MacDonald stopped short of calling on Trudeau to resign.
Every leader, every party has a best before date. Our best before date is here.
The protest, initially seen as a demonstration against COVID-19 health restrictions, attracted people with a variety of grievances against Trudeau and the Liberal government.
These are the heroes. These are the people that stood up, your blue-collar men and women who bring your products and bring your food and bring your medical supplies.
Blaring truck horns, diesel fumes, and makeshift encampments prompted many businesses to temporarily close their doors and aggravated downtown residents, to say the least. But that didn't justify infringing on the rights of Canadians, as Justice Mosley found there was no national emergency to justify using the Act. Ontario Health Minister Sylvia Jones, who was the province's Solicitor General during the 2022 protests, weighed in on the court ruling today, saying the Act protected infrastructure.
We had ambulances and fire trucks who literally could not go on certain roads. So something had to be done, but I will leave it to the federal government on whether they wish to appeal and how they will do that.
But Justice Mosley found that the province, certain municipalities, and their law enforcement agencies failed to act to dismantle the protests. It's something Conservative MP Michelle Rempel Garner raised as a concern when debating the use of the Act with the Prime Minister.
Canadians' livelihoods, Canadians' well-being, the residents of Ottawa being severely impacted, threats of violence at border crossings across the country.
Honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
The problem with that argument is that the illegal blockades at the Ambassador Bridge and the Coots crossings occurred prior to the Emergencies Act being involved, without federal help. And the Emergency Act was not needed to settle the rail blockades of 2020, the Oka crisis, the crisis at Caledonia, September 11th, the COVID-19 pandemic, or any other dispute in Canadian history.
And with that, we're joined tonight by Conservative MP Michelle Rempel Garner to talk more about what is next year. So, Ms. Rempel Garner, when it comes to the protesters who had accounts frozen or were put in jail, can they now come after the federal government?
I think it's a good question, and there's a lot of people speculating about that at this point in time. Unfortunately, the federal government has said that they do intend to appeal this ruling. But I mean, overall, this is a decision that underlines points that many people were making, including myself, other Conservative colleagues at the time, which was the federal government should not have done this. They didn't have the right to do it. And I think it was encouraging to see the ruling yesterday underline those points which we had been making.
Chrystia Freeland, as you mentioned there, was quick to say they're appealing the decision. So how does that process work, and what is the cost to taxpayers? Because this will certainly take more time to be back in court.
Absolutely. There will be a huge cost to taxpayers. That's something that many people have pointed out today. And again, I think that, the more productive response for the government to try and knit back some of that national unity that was definitely lost. And trust in government that was lost when they invoked the Emergencies Act would have been to say, okay, we shouldn't have done that. Here's how we're going to make it right going forward, instead of digging their heels into this decision, which upset so many people, regardless of their position on the protests. I think there were so many Canadians that were very rightly concerned about the federal government potentially impinging charter rights, which again, the court ruling confirmed is exactly what happened yesterday.
I remember at the time you called out the Liberals for this decision. You clearly voted against it. What are the ramifications for Trudeau's party with this finding yesterday?
I think it's really a matter of ramifications for the Canadian public, right? I think that Trudeau's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act was dangerous in terms of its infringement on Canadian charter rights. I think it was deeply divisive. It divided the country at a time when it was really looking for leadership from the Prime Minister, particularly post-pandemic. And now for the federal government to dig their heels into an appeal process, I think it just erodes public trust that the government has their priorities straight. I don't think that they do. And all of those things will translate into the voting public assessing whether or not Mr. Trudeau should continue. I don't think so, obviously. But it just a really silly decision on their part, putting it mildly, and with big negative implications for the public.
It was obviously a very trying time for the people who were living within the main arteries of Ottawa. And so I think it's important to ask what the Conservative Party would have done differently. Obviously, the federal court has found the Emergency Act was unconstitutional, but what other options would the Conservatives have looked at?
There were so many points to that effect made during debate when the Emergencies Act was debated in Parliament last year. The point that was made in the federal court ruling yesterday is that the government had all kinds of different tools under existing law available to them that they chose not to exercise. They went right to the Emergencies Act. And, those were options that the Conservative Party and my colleagues, we underscored in debate in the House of Commons. And further, the Emergencies Act was implemented or invoked after the Ambassador Bridge had been cleared. Other major issues had already been dealt with. So it was, in reading the ruling, I also saw that the judge talked about how a failure in police to enforce the law does not constitute a valid reason for the Emergencies Act to be invoked.
And the Civil Liberties Association has said the justice's decision is a victory for Canadians and also for democracy. And it sounds like this really came down to leadership at the time.
100%. And, I think it's so important to note that for somebody watching this, no matter how you vote, Conservative, Liberal, whatever, there are certain things that should unite us as Canadians, and our rights and the freedoms that we enjoy in this country are something that we all have to protect. And I think that was at the heart of the ruling yesterday. And I certainly, it's my hope that the federal government doesn't lose sight of that by continuing to appeal this decision.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. That's Conservative MP Michelle Rempel Garner.
Thanks.